Hello, 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 everybody. Welcome to today's session. I had a little bit of delay because trying to stream this session live as well. So if you're following me on social media, you can find this session on LinkedIn or YouTube or lots of different other places. So welcome to today's session. As usual, we do this on a regular basis relatively. I try to go on live every week, but sometimes it doesn't work out. Last week I was at a conference, Startup Grind, which was really amazing. If you don't know Startup Grind, definitely connect with that community. It's one of the, I believe, biggest community for entrepreneurs, and it's a great place to find. They have local chapters and events, etc. So they had their annual conference. I was there and met a lot of amazing people. So definitely check that out as a great resource. For a lot of you who don't know me, possibly, I am Nelly Yusupova. I'm a CTO and startup tech advisor. I work with early stage entrepreneurs and helping them um, really understand how to increase product velocity in their startups. And we'll talk about product velocity today a lot because this is something that I think a lot of people misunderstand. And they think that product velocity is about building the product, but it's so much more. So before we get started, I want to let you know that there are some free webinars that I host. You can go to the link pinned to the top of this session or just go to techspeak.co and click on free classes. There is a live class that I'm doing on Tuesday on how to reach product market fit. So if this is something of interest to you, definitely check those out. They're absolutely free. I've created them so that a lot of entrepreneurs can learn the process that we're going to be talking about today. So first, I'm going to talk a little bit about product velocity, and then we'll start answering questions. So if you have a question that you wanted to ask, just raise your hand, and we'll get you up on stage so that you can ask your question. All right. So product velocities. What is it? What is it? What is it? And why do I use that term? Because in order to build a product, it's never just about the product. And all entrepreneurs who are worried about their idea being stolen, a lot of first-time founders always ask me. So I don't want to share my idea with anybody. I don't want to do customer development. I don't want to, if I'm talking to a potential technical person, a partner, I don't want to share my idea with them because they're going to steal it from me, and that's the biggest fear for them. But what you don't realize as a first-time founder is that it's so much more than an idea because your job as an entrepreneur is to make that idea and take that idea and make it a business. And that is the hardest thing to do. And for your idea to become a business, you don't just need to build a product. You need to figure out marketing. You need to figure out um, business development and sales and how to acquire customers and how to really resonate exactly iterate on the product as well, so that obviously people like the product. But if you don't know how to sell, you could have the best product on the planet, you don't know how to sell it and who to sell it to at a cost effective rate, then you don't have a sound business. And so when I talk about product velocity and the importance of getting there really quickly, you as the leader of your company, the CEO of your company, your goal is to get the team aligned on this one vision. How do we make this happen? And iterate not just on product, but on marketing, on business development, on all of the different other parts of your business. Because as soon as you launch any part of your product, the sales team takes over, the marketing team takes over, right? And your team has to work in tandem. So I want you to start thinking about how do you, as the CEO, create a culture of really quick iteration so that your team, every one of your team, whether they're in tech or marketing or sales, can work in tandem together. So I'm happy to take questions about that, but I just wanted to set the conversation around this. And the process that I teach is all based on lean and agile methodologies, so that you can really iterate really quickly. And if you're interested, again, in learning more, there's free webinars that I've put up online that you can take advantage of. Let's see, we have somebody, oh, we have James also here. I'm going to invite James as well. Welcome, Klinsman, to the stage. If you have a question or a comment, feel free to unmute your mic and let's get this session started.
Good afternoon from this part of the world. So I have a few questions to ask. So someone was, can I go?
Yeah, go for it. We can hear you.
Okay, perfect. So someone has an idea, and yeah, and he's about to implement the idea to turn it to business, but it's facing one barrier, and that barrier is the government's policy and regulations. So how are we going to deal with this problem?
Okay. I think I understand your question, but I want you to repeat it and just say, my question is, and if you can very concisely repeat what you just said, so I make sure I understand it.
My question is, someone who has an idea and wants to implement this idea, turn it to business, was facing a barrier in which is the government regulations. How he's going to do this?
Yeah.
What's the best advice to give to him?
So, can I ask you what specific space you are playing in? What industry?
Fintech, financial technology.
Okay, so the question, I'm going to paraphrase the question. The question is, if you are in a highly regulated industry and there's a lot of kind of hoops you have to jump through, what do you do as a founder with very little funding to get around the regulations? And I think the best story to follow here are learning about Airbnb and Uber, right? They had to go through a lot of regulations, and eventually, when they became big, they had a lot of money set aside to deal with the regulatory bodies. But uh, I think the answer here depends on where you are. So in the Silicon Valley culture, they always say, well, do it, try it, and then deal with the consequences later. I don't know whether I agree or not, but sometimes as an entrepreneur, you do what you have to do. And the other thing is really understanding um, the regulation as the hurdle, right? So the reason why you want to go in a specific space is because you have to have some kind of superpower around that space, and maybe you have the connections within the regulatory body where you can actually talk to them and bring them on to your journey with you. And knowing the nuances around the regulation is what is going to possibly help you uh, iterate a lot quicker than someone else, right? So that actually increases your defensibility as an entrepreneur and with your idea. So if you're able to figure out how to work with the regulatory bodies and or work with their requirements well, and you are some kind of expert around that, it's actually going to help you. So there is no easy answer to this. You have to figure it out, unfortunately. But the harder the idea is to get to market, the less competition you will have, and most likely the more expensive it will be to bring to market. So you might possibly be thinking that I need to raise venture capital money or all of these other things, right? So you go to market strategy could be different than all the other entrepreneurs. But I think beyond that, there's a lot of things that you can prove before you get to the regulatory bodies, right? There's a lot of things that you can do with some customer validation, talking to all of the different um, people who are going to be involved and really understanding from their perspective what is it going to take to bring this idea to life. That will be, that's something that you can start doing. It doesn't cost a lot of money. You can do it for as long as you need to, but getting the nuances and understanding from everybody's perspective what are going to be the hardest, most riskiest assumptions that you need to prove out, that's going to help you You can build clickable prototypes to really understand what the solution will be, right? Those are the first two steps of the process that I teach. And then you can start to talk to investors. You can start to talk to all the other regulatory bodies and bring them on the journey with you, right? That's what I would do if I was in that situation. And really understand, because sometimes this is a big issue that I think a lot of entrepreneurs face, is they assume that they're going to overcome something later, and they don't do enough due diligence up front, and they build a solution, and then they go try to sell it, and nobody can buy it from them because of any specific requirements or specific systems that they use to be able to bring that idea to market. So I know that we also have James here on stage. I want to ask James to answer this question as well, because he works a lot with governments and he did a lot of this work as well. So James, do you want to unmute and take this question as well from your personal experience?
Yeah. Hey, Nelly, great to see you. It's been ages.
Yes, nice to see you too.
Yeah. I was saying, sorry, what country did you say you were in, Klinsman? I live in Nigeria. Oh, okay. I don't know. I don't have any knowledge of that space. But from most of the countries that I've worked within, my approach has always been to research what Nelly was saying. Research it very thoroughly, any and all areas that you can. Really focus on being able to share your mission in such a strong way that you can also get experts in various areas that you've identified after your research on board with you. Pro bono, preferably, and or for maybe some advisory shares, some very small amount. And then from there, you can start making a good list of the holes you're going to have to fill and the risk around them, and potentially a bill to fully kind of what it looks like at the early stages, and how to work together with them. The next is to be able to tell your story in a way when you understand, how do we say, where the no-go zones are for politicians, for lawmakers, for how do we call it, the judicial system, whoever's upholding the law in whatever area, whether it's securities, whether it's a whole broad variety of areas. You might have regulatory conditions in. So you got to understand what their drivers are, right? What their motivators are to get something changed, to approve something, to approve you, and then you can work with your group of experts to kind of develop a roadmap of what you do today, what you do tomorrow, what you do in the future. And usually there's a really good path that you can develop in and test markets within without stepping on the toes that cause problems later. And then you can bring the right people in as you've raised investment and so on, and proven it out, and scale that process. Does that make sense? Yeah.
And James, thank you for that. I think maybe do a quick introduction and a little bit of a backstory of why you're such a good expert to speak about this. James is the CEO of Bank Loop and had to do a lot of regulatory, deal with a lot of regulatory issues all across the world. So I think that as a backstory would help set you up as an expert.
Well, I since early 2000s, I've been advising large corporates on ideation through GTM, from a board level, from a C-suite level, a lot of Fortune companies. And just because they're publicly traded, I'm going to refrain from saying their names publicly in this forum.
in my consulting firm, we specialized in that specific area. And then I went on to invest in and found some startups, as well as build out my own portfolio after I exited out of that business. And really have enjoyed the last few years doing that. I founded Bank Loop, which we work, but basically it's technology which helps governments understand and even meet their climate commitments, and corporates meet their climate commitments profitably. And so we work very closely together with governments to be able to meet their drivers, and so that's we don't actually face any kind of regulatory issues ourselves, at least not that are not standard compliance that every company really needs to adhere to. And so that's something that's good, but we do deal with a lot of political and ambition, if you want to say, and understand kind of the spectrum of what it takes to get something new adopted.
Great. Thank you, James. And welcome to the stage. Feel free to hang out and jump in and answer whatever question that you think you can contribute to. All right. So thank you, Klinsman, for that question. Do you have any other questions before we move on to the next person?
No, I don't. Thank you so much, Nelly, and thank you so much, James.
Great. You're welcome. All right. So we have Noor. I'm trying to invite you up. I don't know if you're listening. Feel free to accept and come up to the stage. In the meantime, one of the other questions that I wanted to address today is people saying, I'm struggling to get customers, or I'm having a hard time getting people to use my product, or if I only had these features, I would have more customers. Or it's a story that I hear all the time, almost on a daily basis. And for these entrepreneurs, the solution to solve the lack of customers problem is to do more marketing, so more and more people see the offering, or to build more features into their product so that the product becomes more attractive to people. And they hope that getting their product in front of more people will result in a flood of new customers, and that will solve their problems. Or that by effortlessly building more features, endlessly, I should say, building new features, that their customers will finally see the value that they're promising with the app. But in my opinion, that is rarely the case. And oftentimes, when you can't get customers, really understanding why is really, really important. And it's not so that you can build more functionality, or sometimes it is, right? But understanding why, if you can't get people to find you organically to become customers, that won't change when you put your product in front of more people. If you're not communicating the core value of your app effectively, building more features won't suddenly make the product appear more valuable. So you have to find why people are not signing up, or why they're not staying. And if you're struggling to get customers and are struggling to get them to use your product on a regular basis, you need to go back to validation and go through a customer development framework. So validation, for those of you who might be new to it, is something that is a part of the lean startup movement that was popularized by Eric Ries. And customer development is something that was popularized by Steve Blank. It's very simply get out of the building and talk to your customers, and very few people do that and do that effectively. One of the biggest mistakes that I see when it comes to customer development and interviewing customers is actually leading them to building the solution that you want to build anyway. So in the way you ask the questions, in the way you frame the interview, in the way all of these things, and what you hear is all connected to how you're doing customer interviews. you need to understand who your customers really are and how to market and sell to them effectively. And through these one-on-one interviews, you're going to really get to know um, their fears, aspirations, and all of the different levels of problems that they have so that you can directly address their concerns. And that's how you get them to a solution that you're offering, right? It's almost like if you know who your customers are, you don't, and you are doing a really good job communicating the problem and connecting that, right? And showing them then how you can solve that problem. You almost don't have to do selling. You don't have to convince your customers that this is the solution that they need because they can feel that problem, right? And so if you are having a hard time getting customers, I would highly encourage you to go back and um, really understanding who is the customer. Maybe you're targeting the wrong customer segment, which, a lot of people have to pivot into new different customer segments because they initially realize that, hey, this customer might have a problem, but it's not a big enough problem, or they may not have enough money, or so many other things, right? You need to be able to understand um, all of these nuances so that you can build a product in a way that solves those customer problems directly. So validation, which is module 1 of the tech speak process that I teach, is probably the most important step in the product development process. And you're continuously validating even after you launch your product to make sure that you are positioning your product to the right audience, that you're communicating the pain points, that your product solves correctly, and that you're building the features and functionalities that will solve real problems for your customers and actually create more desire to use your product. So if you are in that space, if you're not sure how to do validation, there's lots of resources on my website, and get on the list. Take some free workshops. Go to the link that I shared with you guys and click on free classes. And I'm also doing a webinar live on Tuesday on how to reach product market fit. And we'll talk a lot about metrics that you can use to determine if you're on your way to product market fit. Because if your metrics are showing that you have very low engagement and very low retention, then you need to go back and revisit customer validation and reiterate a lot of maybe you are not targeting your customers properly, maybe solving the wrong problems, right? And all of these metrics will allow you to see if you're headed in the right direction. James, I saw you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
I was clapping.
Oh,
but yeah, I'm always happy to add. I tweeted yesterday. Musk tweeted about how his company hit $1 trillion with $0 spent. Hit $1 trillion valuation in public markets with Tesla there without spending it $0 in advertising. And I think people go, oh, there's a bridge between what Nelly's talking about and building great product that people trip over to buy, and you as a founder telling a great story because you understand the customers so intimately. And it's not about your oratory skills. It's not about your pizzazz or stage presence. I would say some of the greatest entrepreneurs sucked at all of those skills and do today. But they understand intimately the metrics around their market, around every nuance, and they understand what the drivers are going to be, and they take a lot of detail on that when they iterate and how they run their research. And Nelly is very, very closely attuned to the proven principles and methods. So I loudly support her because, I get hit with hundreds of spams every day from agencies saying, oh, lead generation, oh, this, and everybody's trying to get you to spend money on advertising and acquiring customers. And so many people on Clubhouse come on and say, oh, I need investment to use these services. No. Please don't. Build great product. Have your customers tripping over themselves to buy it. Is the best way to run a business.
Yes, very well put. So we have Nazir here in the room. So Nazir, if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and go for it.
Hi everyone, I'm Nazir. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm making a platform for bloggers monetization, and I have a question. What is the next step after you launch your product? You proved your model. You understand that model working, and you have your core of audience who use your platform, make revenue. What's gonna happen next? You should give them opportunity to choose what next features you will add to platform, or they should say you what you should add to the platform to be more interesting for them. So my question is, who should lead future making features in a platform? You as a founder and leader of this company, or your customers and users?
Great question, Nazir. So I'm going to paraphrase it so people who maybe didn't hear it understand it. So the question is, once you launch your product and you have an MVP, you're iterating on the MVP, who is responsible for coming up with new feature ideas? Is it you as the CEO, the driver, the leader of the company, or is it the customer? And the way I teach this, and with the people that I work and advise, is that the customers drive the product, but you're never asking the customers, do they need this feature? Do they want this functionality? Right? It goes back to something that we just talked about, which is validation. Validation allows you to understand the pain points around the problems that you're trying to solve. So validation will tell you on a smaller scale how to solve those problems. Like, what problems do you need to solve? And your job as the founder and the team that you have is to understand what is the best way to solve that. So you're never asking your customers, is this the feature or functionality that will make you stay? You need to understand the specific problems, because sometimes customers will tell you, hey, I need this feature. I really need this because this is going to help me do X. But when you dig in and you understand why they're asking for that feature and functionality, it's not the way that they're proposing to solve that problem is actually not the right way. There might be better ways to solve it and for more people. So that's why we never take at face value what customers say they need, because most customers have no clue what they need. It's your job as the entrepreneur to understand how to build a product. No one else is doing that. And do it in a way that customers can't even envision, right? I always use this quote by Henry Ford, who said, if I asked my customers what they needed, they would have said faster horses. It's because customers at the time had no clue that automobiles could be a way to solve a specific problem, from getting from point A to point B faster. But Henry Ford understood that getting the problem that he was solving is getting from point A to point B faster. Is, he can envision something that the customers couldn't. So that's why you should never be asking your customers what they need. You should be understanding what specific problems they have. So in a tech speak, which is the process that I teach, I have a 10-step process. First step is validation. Step number 10 is, after every feature and functionality, you need to incorporate behavior analytics. So you need to understand what specific key performance indicators and behaviors you want to track within your product. And based on those details and the data that you collect, the behaviors that you collect, that will also allow you to understand how people are using your product and what specific issues they might be facing. And so between those two things in step one, where you're talking to customers on a smaller scale to validate your riskiest assumptions, and then in step 10, where you are looking at analytics of actual users using your product, that will help you determine what specific issues you need to be focused on. And that's how you determine as a company what to focus on. And those issues that you think need to be solved based on the data that you see, those are assumptions. Those are not things that you're just going to take at face value and determine, are those the things that I need to build. You're going to take them back to step number one, and again, go back and talk to customers and validate, are those assumptions that you have actual problems for customers? And then you start to, with your team, determine what are the best ways to solve the specific problems or issues that you're seeing. Does that make sense? So it's an iterative loop that you're using with your team constantly. It's a 10-step process. In my process, there's many different ways to build products. If you want to learn mine, go check out the free webinars that I have. I'll break it down the 10 steps for you. But that's the process that I use. And so in my iterative process, I use customers to understand the problems that they're having and the level of the problem, because the higher the level, the higher the pain point, the easier it is for you to then sell it back to them, right? The more likely they're going to pay you for that solution. And then it also helps us as a team to make product decisions, to understand what specific things to focus on, to prioritize, right? All of that is going to help us iterate on a product really quickly. Hopefully that helps you, Nazir.
Thank you very much. It's very helpful. Thank you.
James, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was gonna say there's two key metrics, three key metrics, but two that in that loop to me, and Nelly's process is 10-step process is great, but just for those listening to kind of break it down into kind of what's some of the key things being listened for when you're evaluating your metrics of your market, of your opportunity, of the problem you're trying to solve, the two most important things to map when you throw your mural on the wall and you're doing your sprints is your desire metrics of every possible facet of the market and of the potential solution and the correlations. Then your flow metrics or your friction metrics, they're opposites of the same thing. Basically, how many actions are you eliminating? How are you simplifying it? What barriers are you lowering for anybody that's utilizing your potential problem? And why those two are so important is because people buy what they desire, not what they need. So many times founders build product because the people need something. They wonder why it doesn't sell. People don't buy it because they need it. They buy it because it's sexy chocolate, because they want it. They'll trip over it. They'll do anything to get it. Then they'll keep using it if it's simple, if it's easy, if it eliminates actions. People don't go get the latest iPhone or whatever gadget because it makes their lives more difficult. They don't download the latest app because it makes their life more difficult. They don't do anything innately unless it creates desire. And there's multiple factors, including money, that create desire. Now, can you achieve the highest amount of desire and the lowest amount of friction or the greatest amount of flow in their lives profitably? Basically, those two things cost money to get there in your development, in everything. So when you as a founder are leading and you've mapped these metrics, utilizing 10 steps or however many steps on whatever system you prefer to do, now you can make the decision as the CEO as to what next is best. What is going to lower that barrier the quickest? What is going to raise the desire the fastest? What is going to lower the friction for your customers the quickest? They necessarily do not know that. This is so that's up to you, as Nelly was just saying, to understand that intimately and to throw yourself into it. And that is what helps you tell the great story that also helps get your desire going.
Wow, thanks. It's mean a lot for me, this type of tips. Thank you very much. Thank you, guys.
You're welcome, Nazir. Thank you for the great question. So before I take on Charles's question, we have a question on LinkedIn. Uh, and it is Tubin Batra is asking, is there a portal which has all of the tech potential co-founders and non-tech co-founders so that it's easy to match and have a conversation between them? It certainly seems like a good problem to solve and do a great job for entrepreneurship mindset. So there are platforms. One of them that I can think of is Co-Founders Lab. There's lots of different places where you can potentially meet your potential co-founders. So I don't know if you're asking that as is this a good idea for a business, but there are solutions that already exist. So, and since we're on the topic of co-founders, I want to just make sure for a lot of the people who are in the room to address this topic. So let's say you find somebody on a platform like Co-Founders Lab, and this person on paper seems like a great partner. I think what I would like to advise that you don't do is jump into that relationship too quickly, which tends to happen, especially if you're not a technical founder. You have a really hard time getting anyone technical to pay attention to you. So as soon as anyone agrees to have a conversation, you're like so excited that you forget to do your due diligence. You forget to ask the most basic questions and you jump into that relationship way too quickly. And guess what? The number one reason why a lot of relationships or startups fail is because co-founders can't get along. It's because co-founders can't agree on how to grow the company, or they had misunderstanding or values mismatch, right? It's not just about skill set. If you are looking for partners, you need to take the time, get to know them, maybe hire them first, work with them on a specific project, figure out what it's going to be like to work with them, because you guess what? You're going to be spending more time with your work partners than your real world partners, your husband, your wife, whatever. So take the time when you're looking for a partner, a life partner. It takes you sometimes years to find that person and say, this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. But when it comes to co-founder relationships, you don't do that due diligence. So I want to just mention that so that it is at the forefront of your mind, whether you meet this person online or in person at an event. You need to do your due diligence. Don't fall in love with them simply because they said yes to you after hearing 100 no's. So with that, let's invite Charles to the stage. Charles, welcome to the stage. Feel free to ask your question.
Yes, hello, Nelly. Thank you for the space. My name is Charles Shimakishi. Thank you, James, as well, for the feedback and comments there. I am a proud founder of Zaniheza, which means welcome, and it's beautiful in Kinyarwanda, a language spoken in East Africa. Now, my question is, Zaniheza is essentially the world's first travel marketplace for immersive experiences. We say it's an experience, it's not a tour. And it looks like the pandemic is slowly ending, so we are surviving it. So my question is, it's about the story. It's about the story because some of us, we see a personal situation. That was my case. That's how Zaniheza was born. And from there, we realized that there is a problem. But you are telling a story that started from a personal experience. And now, when you get into now, they say raising money and talking to people and so on, I think you have to find a way to make that story relatable to the people listening to you, even though you may be way ahead in so many ways. Like, for example, Airbnb, they said that it was the worst idea that has ever worked. That's from the founders, by the way. And if you try now to sort of make the story relatable and then it may lose that sort of the essence of it. So that's one of the challenges that I'm kind of facing here. I mean, I can see the story, and yes, in my case, once I have looked into that story, like immersive, when people travel, like for me, it's now saying, okay, if you go to Africa, where we are now starting, people know just about the safari, but how about the culture? People may go to Africa and just go for the wildlife, but there is more. The continent is 54 countries. So that's what I'm finding a challenge is, I have my stories sort of aligned in my head. Now it's just a question of how do you make it relatable without losing the essence of why you started this somewhere.
Well, Charles, and it's such a great question. How do you tell that story without losing the essence? Because when you're starting at the beginning, you are going after a certain type of customer. I refer to them as your early adopters. Those are the people who have the biggest pain point for the type of problem that you're solving, and also are the biggest desire, as James says, to be able to use your product. You're not going to try to sell to customers, to every customer, and you're not Airbnb. You don't have the amount of money that they have right now. So it's very, very important to, in the beginning, focus in on those early adopters. And your story needs to connect with whoever you are serving. That's why it's so important to go back to validation. I'm going to beat that thing to death. Go back to validation and understand who are your early adopters. Understand them intimately. Where are they from? What are their specific things, right? Because not everybody's going to care about going to Africa and seeing the 54 continents, right? You need to find the people who do want to do that, who have that desire, and understand why they want to do it. And then if you understand why they want to do it, then you can use their stories, their desires, their pain points, their needs to tell and craft a story that would resonate with the bigger audience. Because right now, if you asked me, I'm not your audience. If you asked me to go to 54 countries of Africa, even though I love to travel, I don't have enough time, right? I'm not your customer. So you shouldn't be talking to me. No matter how much you tell me that story, I'm not going to resonate with you because I just don't have the time. If I had the time to go to Africa, I want to go to see the safari because that's the thing I know. That's on my bucket list, but I don't even know what is out there and I don't want to at this point unless I hear a story that you've painted about why I should go to other places rather than the safari. And that's the reasons, right? I don't think you should come up with those reasons yourself. You can get your customers of people who already have that desire to tell you why, and then frame the story from that perspective to connect with other people just like them, similar to them, and then educate people like me who are not interested in that why I should reconsider. Why is it so much more richer as an experience than what I think I should do? But in the beginning, you should only be going to after the customers who already have that pain point, who already are interested in going to different places, because that's where you potentially could get, initial traction, start to understand how to serve that market, and work out a lot of the kinks that people like me. Unless if I go on a trip with you and you let's say you convince me that this is the best experience, and I have the worst experience because you haven't worked out all the kinks, guess what? I will not tell all of my friends about it. And because I expect that this service, whatever you promise on, is going to be perfect. But if I'm an early adopter, I will overlook all of the other kinks or issues that I might face because I already have the desire to do this and I don't care about the little things. So that's why it's so important in the early days to go after the early adopters, people who have the biggest pain point, and then work out the kinks with them. Perfect the service before you go after the bigger market, and you'll already know how to tell that story a lot better for people who don't have such a high pain point.
So I think what Nelly, if I was going to throw my bit in what Nelly just desire points, the great food, the great animals, the great views, all things made. Then you have things like security concerns, vehicles,
James, sorry, your voice is breaking up. So can you try again?
Am I back?
Yes, I think you're.
Wi-Fi.
Yeah, yes, you're back.
Okay. So when you have all those desires, was I clear on the desire part?
Yes.
Would you lose me? Okay. And then you have your security concerns, your travel concerns, the quality of water, food, all of these other concerns, right? And then you have budgets. So maybe if it's a luxury budget, you have all the 5-star places, you can afford all the. But then you have people, you have your market, which is all different budgets, right? That are going to pay for X experiences, whether it's climbing Kilimanjaro or going to Azerbaijan or what all these different places, to go hiking and seeing this type of thing. You have all these different factors that come into creating friction and or desire. So when you map your space, that's why it's so important to understand every segment of the market, every demographic, and what creates the desire and what people are willing, and how, and every element of every type of product. So that when we get into that, that is what goes from being an idea to being a business. When you can nail that and have those metrics working for you with one product, and then when you can duplicate that to 2 or 3, you can build out without losing those core statistics, because you also have your other impact of the app or the website that people are interacting you on. If it gets too busy, it was maybe simplicity that they were coming to you for, that one experience. So really, really important to understand every metric. Sorry, just wanted to really drill on that.
Great. Thank you, James. Absolutely. So, Charles, does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Excellent. Very cool. So I have another question before we go on to Matthew. I have another question from YouTube from Amaya. And she says that I mentioned the pain point should be level 12 out of 10. So how are companies like Snapchat and TikTok solving high level problems? Well, let's analyze that. It's a great, great question. So, what problems do companies like Snapchat and TikTok solve? So, for those companies, they have two sets of customers. They have the creators, people who create the content, and then they have the advertisers for people who actually, the customers are actually the advertisers, not the users. If you want to look at the definition of a customer, is the person who pays for the product. So the problem that they're solving for the users is boredom, right? So the people who use the product, they solve the problem of boredom. And the creators are the people who are creating the content. The more entertaining they are, the more likely they are to get followers. So the reason why the creators go on the platform is because there's a way for them to share their message. They could monetize it in other ways. So the creators, there's actually 3 sets of customers, right? The creators, the users, and the advertisers. The creators, the problem that TikTok solves for creators is that they are giving them a platform to be able to make money. So that's a big problem. For the users stay on the platform because they're bored, and that's what they want to educate. They want to get educated and or be entertained or whatever else. That's what social networks allow us to do, or connect with other people as well. So that's why, if they're able to, the reason why TikTok is successful rather than all the other social networks that launch is because they were able to figure out how to get a lot of people on the platform and be able to provide all of that value both for users and the creators. And then as soon as they were able to build up the platform enough so that they become valuable to advertisers, now the advertisers can reach their customers by paying money to TikTok. And the same thing with Snapchat and all the other social networks that essentially become popular is because they are able to tell the problem for different types of customers and entice them to use them, despite the fact that they don't own the platform, right? With the whole Web3 movement, and everybody is up in arms about YouTube and monetization, but people still continue to use it because they're able to extract the value. They get access um, to the different types of people that they need to have access to disseminate their messages, etc. So that's why we continue to use the platforms despite all the other problems and complaining that we do when it comes to the controlling companies that potentially don't let us monetize as much as we can, but we still continue to use them. So, from that perspective, if you dissect each company and understand why certain users would come to the platform, if I just built a social network today and there was only 1,000 people on it, unless it's a very niche social network, by the way, which is great. If I am an accountant, for example, and now I have a social network of other accountants that I could potentially network with, that could be a great social network, but it's not a giant business, right? So niche social networks could work, but you need to understand specifically how are you going to monetize that. And if advertising is the way that you're going to do it, you need to have a lot more people than 1,000. So hopefully that helps, Amaya, to answer your question. And with that, we're going to go to Matthew. Matthew, welcome to the stage.
Hello, thanks, Nelly. Good morning or afternoon. PST time, Seattle. And I am Matthew, the founder, CEO of Socks. It is a laundry service thing, Uber for laundry. Put your laundry in a bag. Oops, sorry. Put your laundry in a bag. We'll pick it up, wash it, drop it back off. So I'm pretty much still building up my MVP, and right now I'm struggling to get signups, users, drivers. So before I actually launch my app, which I'm building and working with the team, how can I go about marketing and advertising? I suck at marketing, advertising. I'm an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
And I suck at it, right? So I'm looking at, metrics, KPIs, all these things, analytics. And my creative ability isn't marketing, right? Is building and designing and all of those things. So
Yeah.
Did I bring in a marketing team or someone to focus on that? Or should I continue and just continue trying to figure out my base? Where would you start as far as having spent, I mean, it is a lot of money to build an app and something, what I'm doing, which is pretty much a new space. I do have other competitors. And the good thing about having competitors is understanding what they do and doing it better, right? So,
yeah. So great question. Yeah. So Matthew, I'm going to paraphrase your question. So Matthew is in the process of building the MVP. He has a team of people who are doing that. And the big question is, how does he market his service? What should he focus on, etc.? And this is, I don't know when you came in, Matthew, we started the conversation with the value and how people think that I'm struggling to get customers. What do I do? And the way that I'm going to approach to answer your question, and the way that I recommend a lot of people do this is actually doing a lot of the marketing up front. So we talked about validation being the very first step that you need to do to build a product. Most technical people, and Matthew, I'm not picking on you, but this is a very I'm going to use you as an example to tell people what not to do, because what most technical people do and what a lot of people do who build businesses traditionally is they build a product first, and then they go and try to figure out who is the types of customers, who am I going to sell this to. So the marketing is something that you're doing after you build a product. What I'm recommending is that you do the marketing before you build the product. You really need to understand, the nuances, why people want this service. Why do they desire this service? I'm going to keep using that word, James. Why do they desire, like, why are they coming to you specifically? And who are the specific types of early adopters who are going to buy this from you? I have people in my program who pre-sell their product to actual customers before they build it. It's because they've done some of this work ahead of time. They have just a clickable prototype. They've done validation really well. They have just a clickable prototype, and then they go back and sell this, get letters of intent from or actual customers from people who want to buy this thing because they have found a level 12 out of 10 problem, right? And so the fears, frustrations, aspirations, all of these things that you're getting from validation, you are actually determining what is the specific marketing message that you need to be able to tell that story. We talked about metrics and all of these things will all come from the specific um, work that you've done in the validation. So if you haven't done that work yet, you already build a product. The very first thing that I would tell you to do is go back and do validation. And not so that I'm not telling you your product is not good, that your idea is not good, but it will help you understand the specific target customers you should be going after, who are your early adopters, and how to communicate with them effectively. And then based on who the customers are, you can determine what specific platforms would be the right platforms to go after, right? What specific mediums? Is it Facebook? Is it YouTube? Is it TikTok? If they're Gen Zs, right? Is it email marketing? I don't know. Maybe you do real world events. I have no idea, right? But you need to understand who are you selling to and how to reach those customers better, and the specific messaging that you need to use in order to create your marketing campaigns. Getting a marketing firm in your company, I think, is going to do you a disservice because they're going to want to splash your product in front of a lot of people. But if your product doesn't ultimately have retention, really high retention, you're going to waste all of that money because we call this, there's a technical term for this called the leaky bucket, where the product is good enough, but it's not great, right? You get people on the service, they don't realize the value of your product quickly enough, and they don't come back, or they don't come back on a regular basis. You need to solve all of those issues, or maybe it's hard to use and you need to work out some UI, user experience problems. So you want to be able to do marketing slowly at the beginning so that you can work out a lot of those kinks, make sure that your retention rates are really high before you do the big splash marketing. So hopefully all of those things help you with your next steps, Matthew.
I was gonna say, Nelly, I remember 5 years ago when my dry cleaner in San Francisco first said, "Hey, we're thinking about adopting a new service, and that you can get it dropped off and picked up from your door. What's important to you?" And having kids, having this, having that. I was like, "Oh my god!" But then all of a sudden, all these other people were trying to get the apps and this and that, and all of a sudden the price just went like to quadruple what I was paying at the local dry cleaner. I think it's really important to understand your value props, and I'm probably your epitome of people that will spend money on things that are convenient and great products. But there is still that price point where their competitors didn't do the right research. and they lost my business, even though that they did a great job with their brand and marketing. They just lost me at price point, and I stuck with my local dry cleaner that had adopted an app and was white labeling a service. Basically, somebody like yourself had just come to them and said, "Hey, we'll drop off and pick up all your customers' laundry for whatever flat fee, and they can pay a monthly fee and if for so many pickups and drop offs, and if they go over that, then it's so much extra and so on." And it was absolutely wonderful. And I think they probably had, if I remember right, about 85% of their customers sign up for it. So if you just, this is the prime example of understanding your market. Go talk to the people that are doing it and pay attention to the pain points of the people using those locations and what price points might be their budget.
Yeah, I love what you just said, James, and the example was perfect. That also made me think that, hey, instead of maybe going directly to consumers, you might want to go directly to businesses, right? And so instead of your business model, instead of being B2C, becomes B2B. And that will, of course, help you sell a lot more product and get a lot more customers a lot faster. And marketing to B2B is going to be very, very different than B2C. And understanding who you're selling to, who is your actual customer, is really, really important. So hopefully, Matthew, between the two of us, you have your to-dos here.
I was going to say, and I can guarantee you, when they go to all the dry cleaners, they probably all know each other, talk to each other in some way. Picking up the phone to a few places, making them really happy customers, making their customers really happy customers. Things spread like wildfire in this stuff. You should spend $0 on marketing this business, advertising this business. It's something that can grow. If you create the right product, it will grow wildly organically.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it a lot. I will definitely focus on those things you two have mentioned. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. All right. We'll take one more question and then we will close down the session for today. If any of you are interested in learning how to do validation, what is the specific process that you use? How do you increase the product velocity in your startup? Check out the free webinars that I have for you on techspeak.co. The link is also pinned to the room. So just click on there and click on free classes.
You there, Nelly?
Oh, yes. I was talking to you guys, but I was on mute. Okay, thanks for the heads up. I wanted to invite Piyush to the stage for the last question. And welcome to the stage, Piyush. Hopefully I pronounced your name correctly.
Hey, Nelly. Yes, you nailed it. Great to be on the stage here again with you after a very, very long time. I think I'm coming to your room after a gap of 5 months. But obviously, you run these great rooms. One thing which I always get asked is how can a non-technical person be part of the founding team of a early stage startup, and how can they complement a CTO? And by the way, I am a newly minted chief digital officer at a startup, which has about 400 people. But I have been a CTO in my past life. I come with a almost 30-year experience, variety of management consulting roles, big four as well as big tech companies. But this startup question always gets asked of me. So I thought I'll run it by you guys.
Great question. So I'm going to repeat the question. So how does a non-technical, or what's the best way for a non-technical founder to be useful in a founding startup? If there's a CTO or somebody technical. And there's a lot of uses for non-technical people. So even though the non-technical person can't build a product, today 90% of our discussion was talking about how product is important, but understanding how to sell it, how to create the value proposition, what specific product to build. Those are all things that non-technical founders can do. Essentially, they become product people and they interface with customers, gathering all the data, understanding what specific product needs to be built, and also be able to run the process so that the team iterates really quickly, that they're not building too much technology, that they are using the lean way of building product. What I find is that traditionally, a lot of technical people resist that. They want to be able to build the perfect product. They want to build they're excited about using some specific technology that they want to learn, but it may not be what you need at the beginning. At the beginning, you want to be able to find product market fit. You want to be able to find the specific customers that desire your product and what specific things, problems that they have that you guys can solve. And so, with a lot of the things that I teach, I actually work a lot with CEOs and teach them this process. How do you think this way? How do you get your team aligned in working in this way? And whether they're going to be initially doing the product role and what are the specific things that they need to do. Because at the beginning, a lot of startups don't have enough money to hire full-time product team or project management teams, right? Somebody has to do that role. And that role oftentimes falls to the non-technical person. And the technical person, obviously, then once we've defined what specific things we're building for the product, they're iterating on the product itself. So hopefully that helps, Piyush. I don't know if you have any follow-ups.
Yes, so no, that's great. The way I have been explaining is the non-technical person on the founding team becomes the customer advocate and thinks like the customer and doesn't let the CTO go down the rabbit hole.
Correct.
That's been my way of explaining.
Absolutely. It's a great way to put it. And because the CTO oftentimes is just focused on technology. They just want to build. And I want to get away from that thinking. I want the team to really get aligned on this is the way we're going to build. And our goal is to move fast and iterate on whatever we're learning rather than we're going to build a set of tools and technologies in this way, which is the traditional way of building. And we're just going to have a product at the end and it's going to scale to millions of users and you have 0 users, right? Doesn't make sense. So keep your CTO in place, and going down the rabbit hole is a perfect way to put it.
And if I may ask, Nelly, and I put this question to the CTO of a big tech company at a public forum recently. I was doing a interview with them publicly, and I think I should ask you and this team as well. And I want to compare the answers.
Sure.
The question is, we all, many of us have, at least I'm an engineer and I went to do my MBA as well. So obviously MBA prepares you for business and makes you ready for any big organizational challenge as well. Obviously not as much in a startup. But are there any schools, finishing schools, let's say, to make you a CTO?
Are there any schools that will help you be a better CTO? So the way that I'm going to answer this question is probably going to be different. So in order to be a CTO at a big company, you have to have certain credentials. You have to have gone to certain types of schools. You have to have done certain types of things. And essentially you have to go through the ranks and the ladder and climb that up and all of that. The startup CTO is very different, right? A startup CTO, and there's a YouTube video that I have called The 6 Qualities a CTO Should Have that you can watch. And I believe that every CTO should have. It's a business and a tech person, understands both, and is able to scale teams, onboard teams, implement a process, keep developers happy, etc. Right? It's a very hard to find person. But in the beginning, of your startup, you actually are not looking for a CTO. You're looking for a developer, someone who can build a product. Very few CTOs at the prime of their career know how to code because they haven't done it, right? They've become a manager and a people manager person. So they're still technical. They can still speak tech. They can understand a lot of complex technology, but they're not coders. And so you need to understand at the different levels of your startup, who are you looking for? Are you looking for really a developer? You're giving them the title of a CTO, but eventually they need to step up into that role and actually manage people. And the way I learned my skill set was by actually doing things. I went to work at a startup. I was given the title of a CTO, and over the next 10 years, I grew into that role. But because I was in a startup, I got to do business development. I got to do sales. I didn't just do tech. I managed the team. I built product, right? And I learned, iterated, even in my career, everything on the job. So that's a very untraditional path. Traditionally, I don't know if there is a school that can teach you everything you need to know. I think a lot of the work happens on the job. Nobody can teach you how to manage people properly. If you're ultimately a bad manager and you don't like people, you're never going to be a good CTO. So there's certain things and characteristics that I think have to be a part of your personality that no one can teach you. And I think it's a combination of school and constantly learning and evolving yourself as a leader that will make you a good CTO. I don't know if that's a good answer, or if you have an answer, I'm curious to see what your answer is.
No. You did fine, Nelly. And actually, in the interest of time, I'll let others ask questions. But I do want to say that I lead a organization of engineers called American Society of Engineers, and people are open. I'm open to connecting with people. Go through my LinkedIn Linktree link on my Twitter profile, and you'll be able to get there. Happy to connect with anyone on LinkedIn or Twitter. But Nelly, I want to ask you if you are open to doing public talk slash a panel discussion for my membership. This is a nonprofit. We do it for the public. If you are open, let's connect and talk on LinkedIn.
Sounds good. Yes, I do a lot of talks and speaking, so definitely reach out to me, and then we will determine a time. Thank you so much. Absolutely. All right. So we are at time. I usually do this for an hour because I have the rest of my day ahead of me. Thank you so much for everyone who joined us live, asked amazing questions. If you are interested in learning, again, what this process is, how to take control of your team, get them to transition to the lean way of building product, check out the webinars that I have at techspeak.co. Click on the link and pinned into the chat and click on free classes. On Tuesday, I'm actually doing a live class on how to reach product market fit really quickly. That is on Tuesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then there's some on-demand webinars that you can do, that you can take on how non-techies can launch successful tech startups, how to build an MVP without a technical co-founder, and finally, how to cut your product development costs by up to 50%. Check those out, absolutely free. And reach out to me if I can be of any help. Thank you so much, James. Thanks for joining us and answering some questions as well. And you're sharing your perspective. You're always welcome in the rooms. And everyone else who asked amazing questions and gave us a lot of great content. Thanks so much. And we will talk to you next week, hopefully. I'm going to try to do these weekly, but sometimes it doesn't work out. Have a great afternoon, everybody.